I became known to be the guy who claims that when you project a refracted light on a surface and you will see what seems to be some kind of a self-executing code or just running code. And the code has the kind of property that hallucinations usually don't. People say, well, okay, let's say I'm following you there. Let's say, okay, this is real. Why would they make it available? And the first thing that is obvious that it's not a secret. It is actually a breadcrumb. And I think the octave jump that is happening is actually one that is required for whatever else we're supposed to be doing next. It's almost like I always say, like if it's some kind of an RPG game, Final Fantasy VII is like a really famous, you play in Midgar, right? You play in the city, and then you finish Midgar and you step out and you're like, oh, there's a world map. Holy crap. And that's like such an exciting moment. So I think we are in this world map moment.
Yeah.
The universe is the world map. In order to traverse between stars and cross, things that you would need relativistic speeds to do, something else needs to occur in our understanding that is more than just what we currently entertain. I think that what this means is that we'll discover we are the Philosopher's Stone. The beings that I'm familiar with, the simulators, I guess, they kind of came from these like energetic portals, like literally energetic doors opened. The crazy part is that I see all of this, like I can see this coffee cup, like it's just clear as day.
And these are like the insectoid-like beings?
So the insectoids, they have a certain character.
Lovely to have you in the mind meld, because you're one of those people who I know we can just go all over the place, because you spend a lot of time thinking about the same subjects that I am the most deeply interested in. And then plus, you have just such an insane tank of personal experience with, altered states, seemingly contact with other intelligences. And it just always makes for fantastic mind melds, man. So I'm always excited, and I'm excited again.
Like I told you off camera, I love talking to you, and I love your podcast. So this is always an absolute pleasure to be on it.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. One of the things that occurred to me is, we actually just met for the first time in person at Contact in the Desert, sadly, briefly. But it occurred to me that the way you and I usually talk about things, we don't usually talk about it from the POV of the UFO phenomenon. Like I think just because of your interests and your experience, we kind of go down the rabbit hole of entities, of altered states, of consciousness, and contacting whatever these other intelligences are in that way. But how do you think about, given that you were at Contact in the Desert, and I'm sure you interfaced with numerous varieties and degrees of interesting people, how do you think about whatever's going on with the UFO phenomenon?
That's a great question. I actually had to think about that before I went to speak in the conference, because I tend to, even though I'm known to be making very outlandish claims, as I always say, I'm surprisingly conservative when it comes to adopting, just claims, right? So I tend to only talk about the things that I have some direct experience of to a certain degree, so I feel comfortable in that space. UAPs is simply not one of these topics. So I, as I admitted many times before, I've seen two in my life, so I know they're real. I've seen them, 100%, and I've seen one that I think I even voiced it on your podcast. That was as clear as it wasn't even shiny. Like it was just like an object that I could clearly see right in front of me. So I don't have the slightest doubt in my mind that something is happening, and it is a real phenomenon, it is a real thing. But that's pretty much where I stop in terms of saying things that I think I have a good, if there's any good reason to listen to me on this topic. That being said, a lot of people in the DMT space swear that they see a connection between the UAP phenomena and the DMT space and psychedelic space in general. I've just never experienced it. I've never seen it. But there's many people that I respect their opinions in that space that say that there is a link. So I just want to first frame it by saying I really don't know. My intuition tells me that if I have to kind of like throw a wild one, like a wild guess, they're all wild one. Well, there's some less wild than others, but this one wild because I literally have no clue. I would guess that I think they are visitors from other worlds, and they are of the physical kind. However, I do think that they have capabilities that are borrowed from higher civilizations that are capable of traversing between kind of what we would call dimensions and all of that stuff. And I'm simply saying that because of certain stories I've heard from people that I respect their opinion in this regard. Um, so that's where I would place that. Like they are real, they are visitors from other worlds. My position would be, which well, to different degrees, kind of pisses off a lot of people, but I actually think that most people that talk about it in that industry don't really know what they're talking about. They have no
Yeah.
idea. They don't know as much as you don't know, but they just became really good at creating a certain kind of cloud. It's shrouded in this perception that they kind of know something, but they can't really tell you, around which you can do a lot of things. You can have a whole industry around, which, by the way, I actually don't. I have no issue with it. If you go
Yeah.
writing fun books and making fun movies, I'm all for it.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Particularly in the more sort of like journalistic and philosophical approach. But then when there are people who are, because there's also clearly a lot of people who are capitalizing on a sort of um, false or embellished kind of experiencer angle that's like impossible to question, right? Because you can't really question somebody's personal experiences, and then it doesn't like in a lot of cases it never does come out, and then in some cases it does, and then it's like yeah, like the I don't know if you know the story about these guys who got massive on Gaia. Corey Good was one of them, and he was this secret space program guy, and he blew up massively on Gaia. And then because he had a falling out with Gaia and a financial dispute with them, he eventually got deposed, and he was like under oath legally. And he eventually is like, I made all this shit up. Like none of it was real. So I mean, that kind of stuff. Like anybody who's out there telling lies for attention. That I do have a problem with. But if you're
Yeah.
just investigating it
Yeah.
and you haven't even had, I would rather have you be epistemically honest and humble and be like, I haven't had an experience, but there's all this evidence and I find it compelling. I'd rather listen to that person all day than somebody who's like telling the most outlandish, impossible to prove, experiencer stories. Though, as I say that, I'm like, well, some of those are pretty fun too.
As long as you as long as you frame them for what they are, right? And even I would say, even if you're forget about lying, even if you're just keeping the mystery alive beyond what you know is appropriate. Like if you know there's certain information that came in, I'm not thinking about a particular example. I'm just kind of saying in general. If you know of a particular information that came in, it kind of nullifies a lot of the claims, let's say, but you purposefully not sharing that just so you can keep saying what you're saying and belong to this little niche of people who are saying it, then I also have a problem with that. Simply because I place an enormous value on understanding the world for what it really is. And I don't know what happened, but it seems like a lot of people kind of lost touch with that value, and it's almost like a lot of people don't care.
right.
And I do care. I think we should interact with what in fact is going on, not,
And sensationalism sells, man. Like the crazier the claim, the more insane clickbait, whatever, it works. And I feel constantly torn between 100% I agree with you, and then every week I'm like, how do I try to like play this stupid game of like getting people to like care and listen and frame something in a way that it's novel.
So like I actually recently was kind of looking at I had a long journey with all social media and YouTube and stuff like that. But I couldn't really allocate as much attention to it as I needed to because I was building a lot of other things, the infrastructure of Code of Reality, the retreats, all that stuff. So I only recently had enough time to kind of go back and really like look at what's going on. So, and then I started doing this deep dive into like what are the really successful channels do and where do we overlap and all that jazz, right? And one thing that I really now excited about, kind of like the puzzle to solve, is that there are ways to still deliver the goods in terms of fascination and kind of like keeping it really keeping people on the edge of their seats without filling their minds with jello, right? And I think more of that needs to happen. So, for example, Veritasium is a great example of this, even though
Mhm.
he's a very different channel than, let's say, mine or yours, right? But there's a formula there, which is like he constantly asks an interesting question that you didn't think about, or something like that,
Mhm.
right? And the other person that I really like, which is again a very different channel. I don't know if you're familiar with Anton Petrov. He
Yeah.
basically,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, he's masterful at that because I don't know how he does it, but like he pops out a new video every single day with like fully researched. I'm sure he has a team, but still. But I really think like the deeper point that I'm making is that I think we've had enough of this kind of just say whatever content. Like I think that it really ultimately is corrosive, and especially when a whole generation grows up on that, it's like
Yeah.
they don't know how to discern, as Terrence used to say, shit from shinola. You
Yeah,
know, it's like,
it's growing up on absolute intellectual junk food versus, like, nutrition, and it's
hmm
so much it's I think that analogy is actually perfect because those 2 channels you mentioned before, everything from the consumption of the product to the creation of the product is much harder because it's like, well, sure, there's, like, the high product you can do high production value woo nonsense as well. But so that element of it is kind of hard. But it's much harder to make like a scientifically rigorous, well researched argument than it is to just say the most sensational shit on a podcast. But we're going so far away from this, but I want to go back real quick before I forget. Um, I don't remember these 2 UFO sightings you had. Can you remind me these stories?
I wouldn't even consider them stories. I just saw them. So like one time
Yeah, yeah.
it was kind of like the regular, classic like light in the sky. I was sitting in a building with my friends, and without a doubt, like we saw like a thing, and it did like a weird movement and disappeared. That's it. Like it's that kind of, that's what it is. The other one was more interesting because I think I was like maybe 14 or 13, and my mom saw it with me. So I was living back then on the fourth floor, and I looked out of the window, and it was kind of twilight zone. The sun was setting, and from a skeptical perspective, that kind of works against you because that's the time where your cones switch from color to black and white. So it's kind of like where you're the most confused. But I saw it very clearly. Thank you so much. And it was very close to me. So it was maybe the same distance from me as the building was tall. So super close. So like, four stories building, that's about as far as
Wow,
it was from me.
that's super close.
And it
Yeah.
was just kind of hovering there, slowly kind of moving forward. It looked like an upside down cupcake, literally. No lights, no nothing. Just like this spinning thing, and I was like, "What?" And then I called my mom, and she saw it with me, and then in front of our eyes, it just went.
Wow. So you
So
saw that like instantaneous
that clearly,
acceleration. Wow.
no one can erase this from my memory. I had this conversation. Who did I have this conversation with? It doesn't really matter. But like somebody I had a conversation with. It might have been a podcast or something. But basically, we were talking about the fact that how little people trust themselves, and it's understandable to some degree because we are very prone to kind of delusion. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there is a line. Like there's a, you know what I mean? Like there's a moment where when something happened to you, you know it. Like there's no question about it. And I think we do need to bring that back into the conversation. Oh, I remember the conversation was around, I guess, the laser observation and why the conviction is so strong. So in the quick and dirty, obviously, if you want to do more rigorous tests, then obviously you will have to bring in the heavier tools and all the brain scans and double blinds. So I'm in full agreement. But for the quick thing, this was a conversation with a guy that actually recorded a podcast yesterday, Tyler, who I saw him in a different podcast talking about how when I heard him describe it, he sees the console that like the thing that I'm describing, the computer thing, he sees it
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. And I was like, whoa. And also the way he's talking about it, very clearly, he's like, dude, this is crazy. Like, it's different than regular DMT experiences. Exactly. Like, And so we were talking about it and we said, like, notice how different it would be because we both see how we communicate, like we're honest reporters. It's it is different than, like, let's say two people who constantly like having their minds blown by everything, and then they would see the thing and be like, "Oh my god, do you see it? Yeah, yeah, I see it too." That versus like us sitting there and going, "Wait, do you see it?" It's like, "Yep, I see it right now." Like there'll be something about how reliable you are as a reporter generally that would hold water. Yes, not ultimately because you do want to run it through double blends and everything. We're still prone to delusion just like everybody else. But if I know that about someone, that they're clearly interested in just what is true and not just to be seen kind of doing a thing, I can rely on that. There's real information there that can be discerned. And I realized that kind of, I guess, people run themselves into these situations in life where they made so much shit up and they confabulated so much that they know there's a part of them that they know they cannot trust their own word. Like they don't know if it's a memory they made up or a because they don't tend to stay loyal to what in fact happened. And that's a really important. It kind of goes back to what we just said, which is if you raise a whole civilization that just kind of makes shit up,
Yeah.
you never end up with anything of substance. And I think that's a really huge component. And actually, if you don't mind, to pick up on that point with contact in the
Hmm.
desert,
Hmm.
one thing that I was, well, I guess not necessarily surprised because Paul Hynek, who invited me there, also told me this in advance. But I guess it was verified for me that the crowd that goes to specifically contact in the desert is actually, for the most part, super scientifically minded. Like people really genuinely care about what is true. I can't say that about all conferences of kind of like that alternative thought kind, right? Which was very encouraging to me because I wouldn't necessarily guess that if you would just tell me that, right? But I do think that there's a big component of that, and I was very encouraged to learn that, and the level of receptivity to something that is slightly out of their Venn
Yeah,
diagram, which is like DMT, but they're warming up to these ideas, and there's like a real
totally.
receptivity, yeah. So
And and
yeah,
and
go ahead.
I shared that experience as well because you and I both gave talks that were, I would say, a little bit on the fringes of what most people would consider to even be UFO related. And I purposefully tried to frame the content in a more UFO lore dipped fashion. But at the end of the day, I'm Trojan horsing that shit. Like I am Trojan horsing Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, idealism, emanationism, like all of these ideas that I think are incredibly important to try to start wrapping your mind around if you do want to start getting closer to the truth. Because I think one of the things you and I obviously agree on, and I think most people watching is like the ontology, the preconceived notions, the whole sort of fundamental axioms that we try to explain reality through on like a popular level, the way that we learn about the world, ain't really doing it from both a meaning making perspective and especially if you want to try to understand DMT entities, like altered states, the UFO phenomenon. Clearly, either you got to basically do one of two things. Say none of those things are real. Those are all like weird hallucinations, tricks of the senses, things that people have been experiencing since time immemorial. Or you have to say, we're missing something here. Like the way that we're looking at reality does not account for this stuff. And this stuff seems pretty real. So what are we going to do with that? So for me, it's like, it's just as important to try to bring some of those elements in uh, to communities like that may not be thinking in those directions yet. But I think for all the dots to ever connect and for this unsolvable hypercube Rubik's cube to ever like come close to being solved, we're going to have to introduce some of these like deeper concepts, I think.
I couldn't agree more. I kind of did the same thing. The first talk I gave was basically computational simulation, is what I called it. Sorry, computational meditation. And the idea is basically I kind of flipped it on its head, which is very obvious if you're, to you, it would kind of be like the most obvious thing. But I do think that some people don't consider this, which is that my talk was around the disclosure and what it represents in each person's life. So my point was, okay, so it happened. What are you in that? What happens to you the morning after? Are you under the impression that it's kind of like the Messiah, like the second that the aliens came, they're like, we'll take it from here? Is that kind of like what you envision happening? Where is your personal responsibility in terms of your personal work? Like, my point was ultimately simple in the talk, which is that if you tend to carry a lot of negative emotions, that ain't going nowhere. Like, you're gonna wake up and you're still gonna piss off about things, right? So this illusion that people have about this kind of being salvation, yes, it is a very novel and interesting event. Very interesting and novel events tend to be very fleeting in terms of how much attention they capture the second you are not directly involved with them. So the importance of bringing it back to your personal observation of your day-to-day life and how you do that on a regular basis will determine how you actually experiencing the disclosure. The disclosure will be an incredible event of maybe connection, novelty, understanding. You would be able to go much deeper into all of these emotions if you do a bit of work of introspection, meditation, uh, and everything is going to be painted in a better way. But that really can be done now. Like, you don't need to wait for some kind of an event. So I was also kind of like smuggling in concepts that I think that are important, and that was super well received, and I think that it adds something to people's repertoire of how they do things, and it helps them to actually have a better moment to moment. The more I do this, the clearer it becomes to me that no matter how wild the thing is, it always comes back to this,
Hmm.
literally always, which is to some degree, yes, you and I might disagree to some degree, like where the ontology of realness kind of is drawn. But I think one thing that you and I would completely agree on is that the importance of visiting that and actually doing some true introspective work, actually really grappling with these concepts, putting more attention in yourself and the body, they're paramount. They're not a B story. They're the A story for each and every one of us, basically.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Um, Uh, I'm always torn how much to like go back and review things because we did in passing, bring up the console, bring up the laser experiment. And, we did do a pretty deep dive on that the first conversation we had. I think maybe there's some more interesting follow up we could do on the console because I'm not sure if we ever went all the way with that. Um, but there's also something I'm really dying to ask you down this um, path that we're already exploring. So let's put a hold on the first two things I suggested and just continue down this road because there's like uh, a very pregnant question on my mind, which is that thing that you saw all those years ago, and again, it's so hard to know how much stock to put into not things that you saw and know to be true, but then also allowing other things people have seen to piggyback off of that and knowing how much trust to put in those things or not. But do you think that physical UFOs, like the truly anomalous ones, not stuff that is um, our own secret tech, right? Or like alternative physics, do you think true UFOs, like true objects of an anomalous origin, could be related to whatever you're experiencing when you go into the DMT realm? Like could these be downstream physical manifestations of primarily non-physical intelligences that are living in some extended layer of reality?
Yeah. I think that there's a strong case to be made that the reason that everything from the anomalous slice of reality is happening more and more is because it is kind of working crescendoing towards a something. Now, people slap a bunch of concepts on it, right? So, singularity, the rapture, whatever it is. But I think the feeling is very strong that, in fact, it is building towards a something. There's some kind of a realization, which I was very open about, which I do believe that the laser discovery, but nowhere am I saying that this is like kind of like the only or even the main thing. Not at all. A lot of the stuff that are people experiencing, like spontaneous awakenings, which I know for a fact is real. I've seen people go through things that they're completely anomalous. There's no like I think I told you this by passing, but like I've encountered people who could control how I feel just by like putting their attention on me in a particular way. Like like somebody flipped a switch. I don't doubt for 1 second that there's a lot of these things unfolding, and I'm encountering more and more people in my life now that tell me that they've been experiencing these things since they were little children, and they believed for a long time they were crazy, and things like this. Now, you can clean up the data set by assuming that there is some percentage of that is just kind of like attention grabbing and they weren't really experiencing it. Fine.
For sure.
But there's a giant slice of them that did, like that actually are, and you can see it, like they are an honest reporter. So I think that, and they report a ramp up in kind of the kinds of things that they're experiencing, right? The veil is thinning for sure. So I do think there's a good situation that these things are actually directly related. I am simply saying I've never seen the connection myself. But that being said, and again, I don't remember what I already said on your podcast or not, so sometimes
That's
I'll
fine.
maybe repeat
Don't worry about
myself.
it.
But
I don't either.
yeah, but I have in like somebody who you and I know, and I don't think he wants to be mentioned in this context, but someone who's a very respected researcher, uh, like you know, he's up there like with the people that are considered to be like solid reporters of everything.
Has it been on my show?
I think yes, he has.
Ooh, all
And
right.
I'll tell you later. But basically, I don't think he wants to be mentioned in this context. But he did tell me very clearly, very openly. He said he had an experience on, I think it was 5-MeO. It doesn't really matter, on one of the DMTs, where they told him that the thing in Jersey was for real. And I was like, really?
I have been cooking up the goods over in the members section on YouTube and at patreon.com/third eye drops. What are said goods, and was cooking really the best verb you could summon on this occasion? Well, to the former question, said goods are weekly, at least roughly, exclusive content that you are never going to see here on the main feed, with some of your favorite guests, by the way. Case in point, I am slowly working on a doc that I shot at Contact in the Desert this year with a number of your favorite beings on the topic of UFOs and consciousness, and I will be releasing the full unedited conversations with all of those people only on the members channel and on Patreon. If you do join up over at patreon.com/third eye drops, you will get access to all of those exclusive videos, plus a patron only Discord and occasional live hangs and more. And yes, of course, the doc will be coming out on the main feed if I didn't make that clear. So much love for watching, my friends. While I have you, tickle that algorithm, like, subscribe, review if you are listening on Spotify.
Solid reporters of everything.
Has it been on my show?
I think yes, he has.
Ooh,
And
right.
I'll tell you later. But basically, I don't think he wants to be mentioned in this context. But he did tell me very clearly, very openly. He said he had an experience on, I think it was 5-MeO. It doesn't really matter, on one of the DMTs, where they told him that the thing in Jersey was for real. And I was like, really? Like, to me, it was such a toyish story. I was like, get out of here with this. It's like, because somebody, I have a listener, or a regular podcast, who she's from there. Super, like, I love my viewers, and she's awesome. And we had like one of these like weekly things that I used to do. And she sent us a video of her from her window, like doing this, showing me the lights. And I'm like, dude, look. And I even demonstrated to her. I took like a little flashlight that I had, and I showed her the ceiling. I'm saying, watch. And I did this thing with the flashlight. It's like, do you see how it looks exactly the same? Like the thing you tell me in the clouds? It's somebody playing with a light. So I was convinced this is now. It might still be, because he didn't say like, therefore I think that's what's going on. But he said, for all intents and purposes, they told me this as seriously as they say anything. Like, they said the Jersey thing was for real. That's actually them. To 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 my very great surprise, because I completely like rejected that, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that I'm much less quick on the trigger now to kind of judge things and say, oh, I think I know this or I know that. I understand there's a lot of things that I don't quite understand, but I have to be honest about what I was exposed to personally directly, and that's just simply not
That
one of those things for me.
that's really interesting. So when you say researcher, you mean like this person is an academic or a
I'm not gonna say
scientist
much
or
more than that. I don't
that's fine,
want.
that's fine. But I just to give people like
Yeah,
an
yeah.
idea,
It's
like it's
someone who's a scientist who's up in the front of cutting edge research, and he's very respected by mainstream, very smart scientists. So he's considered to be a very honest reporter of these things. He's not the
fascinating.
kind of person who would be like hyperbolic or make things up.
Yeah. One of the things that did occur to me when all the stuff going on with the drones on the East Coast was going on is first of all, that was my base case is 100%. They were testing something. They for some reason had to do these um, secretive tests of like next generation drones for some reason, maybe utilizing the bases that are around there. I don't know. But then there are a lot of unanswered questions like to that effect. Why? Like knowing that it would clearly be shown to so many people, either you have to have factored that in and meant to do that, knowing that it could set off this weird kind of like mini panic amongst all the people seeing it, or my next most likely case after the base case, which is again like the prosaic they're testing something case, is holy shit, something else is going on and we need to put so much stuff up in the sky that it just like confuses people and they don't know what they're looking at anymore. And that was my second case. Is like, could they be putting a bunch of prosaic stuff up in the sky to cover over something else?
And it is a particularly kind of a contentious case because in this case the White House owned it. I don't know if you know this, but they did own it. So
What did they? What I heard them say
they
a
said it
couple
was them.
things, but
They said
okay.
it was them. Yeah, yeah.
I remember them saying like, "Don't. It's not anything to worry about." And
But here's the
yeah,
thing, and this might, again, you kind of have to. Okay, so let me just step back for 1 second. Let's just deal with the meta part of this, right? So before we like keep analyzing every case, you kind of have to make a decision. Every single person has to make a decision where they draw the line of what is reasonable to take as evidence, right? Because if your position is anything the government tells you is a lie, okay, well then there's really, like what can I do? Like you kind of have to look at situations for what they are, because sometimes the government will lie to you. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense for the government to lie to you about certain things. I'm not saying necessarily about this, right? So like we have to take case by case. And in this case, I kind of looked at it and I saw that declaration. It didn't have that something smells off here kind of thing for me. It was just like, yeah, like first of all, it, it's it's so doesn't compute for me where like the government, "Whoop, they can't do anything." It's like, no, they know. Of course they know. Come on, man. Like this is like just the FAA. You know what I mean? Like they know what's in the airspace. It's so that alone doesn't make any sense of that. If now there is a possibility, I can totally like maybe kind of imagine a scenario where, okay, there was coming up some kind of a thing going on. They genuinely didn't know how to approach it. The executive decision that was made, instead of panicking everybody, we're just going to kind of say, we know what it is. Makes sense. It tracks. Again, it's just the nature of what I saw there, like the thing that kind of looked like just a Batman, sign that just kind of somebody was playing with. And the things that I saw that people report as drones, that's not what I would imagine. First of all, it doesn't match the other patterns of the kind of UAPs that we see that truly are moving in very bizarre ways. Those didn't. They literally moved like, so I
right.
totally align with you. They look more like very fast drones. And I also don't know if people are aware of what we already have that we know about. Like I'm sure you know these videos of the um, hypersonic drones, and there's this video that shows like how fast one takes off and goes. It it literally looks insane. Like it's just like boom, it just like disappears like faster than a bullet, right? So that at night can, from pretty up
Totally.
close, can look weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, so easy. But that's not what I would imagine a multidimensional technology looking like.
Mhm.
It's not lights in the sky. And so I kind of weigh that against what is the ultimate kind of, what does it culminate in? Because if it culminates in exactly nothing, the one thing you can say that makes sense here is that, oh, maybe they were the aliens, I mean, maybe they were kind of like testing again, like how we respond. But then if you think about that, it's like there's so many better ways
Hmm.
to engage with the speech. You know what I mean? Like it feels so it feels farcical.
Yep.
Like it's almost like it belongs in like a cartoon idea instead of like a real idea, which is where I'm starting to have an issue with it. And gonna remind you again, somebody who I deeply trust their opinion said they told them that's the real deal. Maybe that was a delusion. Who knows? Like it has to align. It has to land somewhere. Something has to happen that causes a thing that makes you go, ah, I see why that happened. And so far, I have not seen anything like that, happen.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so you mentioned you don't think that's how a higher dimensional technology would work. And that took me back around to that question that I asked you, which is, do you think that these physical objects could somehow be downstream of these higher dimensional intelligences or something like that? And I'm in the process now of making the like full-blown video version of what my talk was um at Contact, which is essentially a sort of um I guess sort of multidimensional, esoteric UFO thesis statement of what is it really, why this sort of metaphysical view that comes from more mystical traditions where they build in this idea of multiple dimensions sort of into their ground level assumptions about reality, right? Like they usually have some kind of idealist ontology where there's a one, there's a mind or a divine mind or something like that, and we're emanating out of these realities instead of there being this ground up kind of materialistic consciousness. And already when you start looking at the phenomenon with those assumptions, you're immediately your whole ontology gets flipped because you're not asking where things come from in physical space, you're asking where things come from, you know, in terms of these higher, deeper, whatever preposition you want to use, layers of reality. And that question that you just said is actually one I want to like throw back to you because it's a super interesting one. Is if there were a higher dimensional object interacting down on our plane of reality, what would that look like? And I'm tempted to riff on that myself because I definitely
Yeah.
have thoughts, but I want to hear. I want to hear what you
Well,
think.
I think I want to be very clear with my language because it's going to sound very conceited if I just run through it. The sentence I'm going to use is I think that I
Yeah.
know exactly how they're doing it.
Hmm.
Okay? I think that I understand exactly how they're doing it. They're doing it along the line. They're already doing it. So the disclosure is already happening and it has been happening for a long time. But it is happening, as Paul Hynek says. He likes to use the word exposure and not disclosure. So they're slowly communicating to each and every one individual according to their level of ability to comprehend and perceive. And it's only when the majority of the species will arrive at a certain level of that ability, when they start interacting with the concepts in a way that is coherent, then that's when they kind of start pulling the actual bridge, right? Because until that moment, it's just too jarring for the civilization. So the civilization simply indicates its own readiness for the thing. And the way they're doing that is imagine, you have a bunch of tools on a desk and you just let the monkey run around. And if the monkey understands what the tools are for or how they can be arranged together, the monkey will start making a thing out of it, right? That is an indication that the monkey understands. But if the monkey just bangs them on the table, no harm, no foul. Okay. Like you didn't understand. You just kind of used it in a way that doesn't make any sense, not what it's for. That's fine. No harm done. That way, there's no jarring moment, there's no nothing, but the tools are left on the table. And I think that's essentially what they're doing. One of the things that I famously talk about, which is that I do believe that, again, this is all my perception of what's going on, of course, but it is essentially like people would ask me like, why do you think they would make the code and the laser visible? People say, well, okay, let's say I'm following you there. Let's say, okay, this is real. Let's pretend. Great. Why would they make it available? Well, if it is real, then the first thing that is obvious that it's not a secret. Never was. It is actually a breadcrumb. And it does make sense to me because essentially, uh, uh, in order to make a laser, you don't make a laser by coincidence. That doesn't happen. In order to make a laser, you need to understand something about quantum mechanics. You need to understand something about engineering, about mirroring, about well, the physics of light, which is a whole branch of physics. There's a lot of things you have to understand to make it happen
Mhm.
reliably. In order to freebase something, there's knowledge involved. There's chemistry, the understanding that when a human digests something, like that, and gives certain effects, but if you make the molecule slightly different, it gives you this other effect. Identifying that this effect is uniquely special versus other effects that are just kind of noisy. That is a discernment that right there, right? So freebasing is another piece of knowledge, like an intelligence test you're passing. You understand things and
Yeah.
the kind of mind that can actually entertain certain things as significant. Because a lot of animals get high. We know this, right? Like jaguars drink the pee of
Mhm.
people, other animals that eat what is it? What's that mushroom?
Amanita
The
muscaria.
I mean, thank you. Um, but they just kind of lay there and go, bah, what I mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of humans do too, right? But when a certain kind of human emerges of a certain level of cognition, that all of a sudden they realize it's more than just pretty colors. They go, wait. That is a level. That is a level of cognition right there. That's an intelligence test. That's the monkey pausing on a tool instead of just banging it and going, wait a second, this can do this. See what I'm saying? So I think that that's exactly how they would be doing it. It's the only considerate way to do it with a
Yeah.
completely different species.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
And what's so intriguing and almost eerie about this is idea of donations, like donated material from higher intelligence is actually something that's widely talked about within the UFO community as well. Um, I've been pulling tons of clips to give illustrative examples of various things in this video that I'm working on. And I can off the top of my head name multiple very intelligent people who talk about this idea of this wreckage, these materials or whatever that are found. They are like donations. They're purposefully given, and then it, just like you're saying, you could think of it potentially like an intelligence test. Like, okay, I give you this, do you know what to do with it? That's one way of thinking about it. I was watching clips of the extended Jake Barber interview. He talks about it that way. Um, Diana Pasulka, the religious scholar, talks about it potentially being that way. Gary Nolan, who I think he's the Stanford professor, who I think they may have been talking about this in conjunction with one another. So maybe it's a sort of compromised pool of data or whatever. But it is an intriguing idea, and I think that this is true, man. Is that whether or not it's an intelligence test that is meant to be an intelligence test, you'll never find a single speck of the physical world that is not intelligible and sensical and filled with more and more layers of truth. Whether you're going more complex or more simple, there's just always more insights and meaning that you can derive from everything. And that's so insane to me. Like that in and of itself is such an awe-inspiring idea that if you ever have like any nihilistic tendencies or you think things don't make sense or the world is chaotic, just reflecting on that, how there's just like infinite layers of meaning and new vistas of mysteries around every single corner, yet it all is intelligible and you can measure it and you can do stuff with it. What the fuck? It's so
Yeah,
crazy if
it's
you really
literally
stop and
infinite.
think about that.
Which, by the way, is the remedy for people's concern about AI and to what end. It's literally infinite. Like there's no end to this. Like and it's not a. I think that what people, and you might even disagree on this because I don't know if you will or not, but a
Mhm.
lot of people do because I think the impression that people get. This is my guess as to why the resistance sometimes. It's because I think that there's something when people ask questions like to what end. I think the impression they get about what's going on is that we're just like kind of this like crazed, maniacal, like more power,
Mhm.
more this. When in reality, I think what's going on is that it's actually an expansion. You can go about it like that, like, clutching it, but you can actually utilize it for expansion, of perceptual expansion, the ability to do more in a way that is more expansive, not in a way that is not in not in not in a way of acquisition, in a way of expansion. There's an ability to do more, experience more, not because I'm thirsty for power and I'm like, like I can't handle not having more. Like it's not like an addiction. It's more like, wow, I get to explore more, and you can take it with any pace you want, but you can keep going. You can actually, and I think the octave jump that is happening is actually one that is required for whatever else we're supposed to be doing next. Like, it's almost like if it's a video game, I always say, like, if it's some kind of an RPG game, Final Fantasy VII is like a really famous. You
Yeah.
play in Midgar, right? You play in the
Mhm.
city, and then I remember when I was just playing the game the first time, I was like, why do I have three more CDs? This is very long, and I'm on like CD. What is the three other CDs? Just movies? Like, what is this about? And then you finish Midgar and you step out and you're like, oh, there's a
Yeah.
world map. Holy crap! And that's like such an exciting moment. So I think we are in this world map moment.
Yeah.
The universe is the world map. And in order to play there, you first have to complete certain levels here. And by the way, in order to play in that realm, I believe it's more than just the physical game at that point. In order to traverse between stars and cross, things that you would need relativistic speeds to do, something else needs to occur in our understanding that is more than just what we currently entertain. And I'm one of my biggest hobby horses. I'm actually writing a book about it right now, which is that I think that what this means is that we'll discover we are the philosopher's stone. We are the technology. So in order to unlock certain ideas of how to do it at scale, we actually have to unlock the interpersonal relationship on a level that we have not yet entertained. And my main thesis is that it's the transformation uh, from the competitive game to the collaborative game. Like, how do you actually move from one to another? Because that's the only game where you can play the competitive game in short intervals. Like, you can do it for 40 years, 50 years, maybe 60 years. You can plan for something, but because one of the strategies inside of the competitive game kind of built into the game is potentially just removing the other players off the board. Because of that, you will always be a hostage of that very short circuit kind of quality, because you will always encounter some kind of a friction from the other players. It's effective. We created quite a bit that way. But if we are now to step into the larger game, the only strategy that makes sense if you want to make a plan for 1,000 years is one of humans, people, players that are literally excited and therefore energized by the prospect of collaboration itself. And
Mhm.
so in a society like that, somebody pulling a fast one on you doesn't even compute, doesn't even make sense. Like, what do you mean? No, we're just stoked that we're going to do this thing for 1,000 years now. We're going to build enormous structures in space, whatever it is. You can allocate funds and trust that system that you can do that, because all of a sudden corruption takes a completely different kind of tilt, which doesn't really make sense anymore because it's all available. And usually the thing that determines why people still fall back on the kind of the competitive thing is because they are the kind of thing that gets excited by the field. If they're the node in the field, they get excited by the competition, which there's nothing wrong with it. It's awesome. We built a lot that way, but it always suffers from this shortcoming that it always entails within it that you painting boundaries. Who
Mhm.
got there
Mhm.
first? Or like, can you create a human that gets the same amount of excitation and meaning feeling through just forget about the project, just the fact that you get to now work on this thing with others. Like, that's the thing that excites you, right? All
Yeah.
of a sudden it flips the game and it allows you for a much longer arc game. And I think that might be what is the main thing they are trying to instill in us and have us understand before we get to play in the larger
Yeah.
arena, basically.
Yeah. It just always blows my mind how we can't, as a species, get on board with any large overarching idea or goal unless there's some kind of mortality, imminent, terrible thing at stake. Like that's the only time it seems like we can get our shit together. It's so sad. But this notion, this larger thematic notion you brought up of unlocking a new part, essentially, of the game, the simulation, Plato's cave, whatever you want to call it. That's just such a uh, tantalizing path to go down. But before we go down, did you ever get fully to answer the question about what a higher dimensional object would look like from our POV? Or
I
like
actually
a
think what I was saying in the laser is literally a
oh,
rotating four-dimensional object. That's literally what I think we're looking at.
so you think so? I'm gonna make you speed run
Sure, sure.
the laser thing. So people and again, if people want this full story, listen to our first
That was a
pod.
great conversation.
I'll
Yeah.
flash it up here. Yeah, it did unbelievably well too, which I'm super stoked about. But yeah, for people that haven't seen that, they're like, what laser DMT language? What that like? Let's give the elevator
Yeah,
pitch.
I became known to be the guy who claims that when you project a refracted light on a surface and you smoke DMT, you will see what seems to be some kind of a self-executing code or just running code. And the code has the kind of property that hallucinations usually don't. It has a certain permanence in space. It has a rigidity. It has an insistence of being itself, despite of any attempt you might, have to derail it from being itself. So, like, hallucinations. Excuse me. Hallucinations change with the as the drug metabolizes through your system. Hallucinations change when you move your head and move it back. You move your head, it might actually change the nature of the things you're seeing. It's flimsy. It can be very convincing on its own right, but it's flimsy. The code doesn't do that. The code is just kind of there. And it's there, seems to be, for everybody. We can talk about how we kind of like now found some clever ways to discern that. But that's what I became known for, right? So what I think is what we're actually seeing in that code, and people can just obviously Google our conversation or any other like a million conversations that I've had about this stuff. So it the, it looks like there's some kind of a rotation happening that comes out of nowhere and goes into nowhere, which is exactly the kind of thing you would expect just like when you're using the flat land example,
Yeah,
right? When you rotate
yeah,
something in the so I do think that we're looking at a rotating four-dimensional object that its three-dimensional walls, when they're cross-sectioning through our layer of three-dimensional space, it appears as something coherent and yet confusing because it behaves in a way that three-dimensional object can't. So it has this kind of like, the thing that you would expect when you're doing these simulations and you're illustrating it you're projecting from 2D to 3D and then just take it one step up. So I
yeah.
actually think that that's one of these objects.
Amazing. Yeah, that's super fascinating and that makes so much sense. And I again think that fits right into what you're saying about unlocking new layers of the game. And it also flips right back into like Plato's cave. And the more um esoteric, here's what they're saying. Like when you read the later exegesis of Plato's cave by these more let's actually do the esoteric shit out in the open Neoplatonists, what they say essentially, and it's they're not all saying the same thing, but this is a broad generalization, is that what it really means to climb out of the cave and go up the ontological ladder is essentially to bring your psyche to a place where it can recognize logoi.
What is
S-
it? They can recognize what?
Logoi. So
Logoi.
logoi is like the plural of logos.
Oh, okay.
And what it really means is you can see like the analogy I've used before that I think works is it's like seeing a ray of light coming from some unknown source, right? Like you can't fully understand or grok, or maybe you're blinded by that source of light, but you can look at a singular ray of light and you can to a degree climb that beam back toward the source. So each time you're having like one of these anamnesis or noesis kinds of moments where you're doing a kind of realization that's beyond just regular mundane kinds of cognition, where I won't go into like what these different layers are according to um, the divided line and stuff. But these kinds of epiphanies that you have that are not normal, that are like a kind of remembering, right? Or a kind of deeper knowing. That's like almost like a logoid discovery. It's like a recognition of something that's beyond something you know on this level, sort of thing. Like it's prior knowledge that exists on a higher plane of reality that you recognize. And I think altered states, particularly like when you're under the influence of DMT or a psychedelic, I think these are like anamnesis machines, like logoi machines, to a point where you start having all of these epiphanies because you start recognizing all these things that you oftentimes don't even have names for, but you're just like, oh, I know this. I know all this stuff. How did I forget all this? And sometimes it's very basic stuff. It's very like, well, I'm going to die. And it's a very, like strong remembrance
That
of
one
that
sucks.
or something. But it's like it's just kind of like drinking from a fire hose of realization, right? And that's often one of the first ones because I think that's one of the things that we're all very consciously or subconsciously blocking all the time is like impermanence. Um, you know, I won't go down the list of everything that's going to die because it's a long list. But yeah, but then it's like thing after thing after thing, and it's like, oh, I have new senses. It seems like, and what is this field of energy and vibration and fractals and it's things that you recognize, but you don't even know what they are. And then when you come back to consensus reality, you don't even have language for it, but you
Mhm.
definitely know that it's important and it's something. Um, so yeah,
But
go
it
ahead.
might be important, but it might not be important in the time that you're here, which is a big component of, for example, what I do, right? So, like in Code of Reality, we're trying to focus on only the things that we can do something with, we can actually measure, right? Because ultimately, that's it's the only thing you can ever hope to do anything with. It's totally fine to create a lot of theoretical frameworks around whatever it is that we want to do, but it has to be substantiated somewhere. Yesterday, I had a lovely conversation with Nife, who's one of the mathematicians of the Trace Institute of Donald Hoffman.
Amazing.
I'm super excited about that conversation to come out. Like it was such a lovely, interaction. He might be a good guest for you, actually. He's a super
I'd be very
fascinating guy.
interested.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he said something really interesting, which I didn't necessarily expect. He said that, yeah, ultimately we are doing, uh, you know, mathematical philosophy.
that's awesome.
He says that for me as a scientist, it would have to find its way to engineering for me to say yes, there's a thing there. And I voiced this vision. It invoked this out of him when I voiced this vision of mine for him, which I think you would have something to say on because you're so deeply steeped in philosophy. That I have this, I like to kind of consolidate everything to some kind of a visual observation of what, in fact, how we arrange things. And my vision of how we do things in the domain of knowledge is that we have these concentric circles, which are not, there's no like a clean cut line between them. It's
Definitely
more
not.
like they kind
Yeah,
of diffuse into each other like a cloud a little bit. So, like, you have engineering, that's where the rubber touches the road. It either works or it doesn't. End of story. There's so many ways it can work. There's infinite ways in which it cannot, right? And you don't get to fudge there. There's just like, it's what it is. Because it's closest to kind of like the space where we occupy whatever we call physical consensus reality. Then you have science right above that, which is there's definitely a place where science and engineer like overlap one on one. There's like the cloud is still very much with each other. But then there's a point where we just simply don't have enough current tools to really substantiate that, right? So like maybe the amount of energy required to try that thing is just simply out of reach or whatever it is. And then you slowly have like more and more theoretical science, but it is science. Like it's based on a lot of rules and mathematical tools and things that we've
yeah,
agreed on. They're solid enough to be considered like, no, we're actually asking real questions about it, right? And then, and this is not in any disparaging way, I think it's a super important component of all of this. Above that, you have another transition, phase transition, to philosophy. There's most definitely regions where science and philosophy, they're one on one, they
hmm,
overlap, right? But there is a point where it just stops being science because there's simply no visible tools to even substantiate these kind of
right.
claims. And the space kind of branches out into these infinite possibilities. And I think it's important because all of these three, they constantly inform one another. There's no moment in which they don't flow into one another to some degree. Sometimes even a tiny particle from like deep, 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 deep philosophy can find its way all the way to engineering all of a sudden because boom, something happened, right?
Right.
And I think that that's a very important component to take into account. So to your point before, for me, where I try and live to the best of our ability, of course, is somewhere with that where the cloud of science and engineering meet in Coda reality. But me personally, because I love it so much, I love swimming like all the way to
Yeah,
philosophical
me
waters out
too.
there and try and bring something back though to see what can be applicable. So I always ask myself, how much energy would it take me to swim all the way out there and come back and have enough energy to do this thing here too? Because ultimately it has to kind of be, there has to be something that we do with it, right? A really beautiful metaphor that I love that Terence McKenna used to use, which is I'm sure you're familiar, which is, the fisherman, right? You go into the ocean and you cast your net into the deep waters of the mind. And your aim isn't to catch some kind of a leviathan that is going to drag you into the abyss, nor do you want to bring back, I'm literally just, you know, saying what Terence said. So this brilliance is not mine. Nor is your aim to bring these tiny fish that like just swims through your net and is just completely meaningless. Like, have you ever noticed that the pinky matches the width of your nostril exactly? Things like this. Um, but you want medium-sized fish that you can catch in your net and you can bring back to the village, so everybody can feast. And I think that is what I'm the most interested in.
Hmm.
What are those medium-sized ideas that we can bring back from philosophy land
Yeah.
that can actually do something with it? And I think it's also maybe a product of uh, becoming slightly older, where I think it's a natural thing where you kind of, you naturally, your energetic resources go down a little bit. So you have to be smarter with your resources, both like your energy levels, right? And I think, by the way,
Yeah.
this is, I'm sure there's some studies that probably substantiate some of this, but to me, intuitively, it makes perfect sense why a lot of people become more conservative, even politically, when they get older. And it has to do with the fact that they realize that a lot of the aspirations that they still believe in, they still totally want all these beautiful things that they imagined before in their 20s. Like, yeah, we're going to go and we're going to do. They lived long enough to realize, okay, there's this thing called life that gets in the
Yeah.
way of these ideals. And you kind of have to measure how much energy you have for each idea. Maybe you need to package it slightly differently for now and maybe first make a thing happen that substantiates the thing, then build on top of that instead of running into infinity and ending up with no energy and no things, right?
Hmm.
So that's kind of like where I sit. Like I'm very measured now, or a lot more measured now, with what ideas I engage with, because I simply understand that it is to some degree finite, and we want to interact with things that
Yeah.
makes a thing happen. Does that
It does,
resonate with?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes me think of the classic return with elixir, right? Like the point of the hero's journey is, well, it's not just a return with the elixir, but that is the final step. Like you got to go through your whole process. You got to go through the refusal of the call and the finding of the friends and the going to the abyss and coming out of the abyss and the climactic part. But then you have to return with something, right? Or you haven't completed the cycle. And so yeah, that resonates a lot. And the other thing that resonates a lot for sure is what you said about like as you get older, you feel more and more the preciousness of your time for multiple reasons, from the most practical to like, and by that I mean, oh wow, I have a finite amount of time to make enough money so that I can like be okay, and then after that, hopefully I have a while too to pursue these other, more philosophical things that don't need to make me money, or whatever your goals are, spending time with loved ones, having experiences, whatever. Um, but yeah, and you also realize something else that I think is something that I've always been interested in, it, which plays into all of this, is what am I uniquely capable of? And I think this gets to the alchemical analogy you were using earlier of the philosopher's stone is a good symbol for this as well, which is the completion of that great work for each one of us is like there's an archetype that goes over the top of every single person that applies to every single person. But in the individual, it's going to take some different form, right? Like your version of whatever you can do and whatever your ultimate expression is going to be different than mine. Like your and mine are a lot closer than most people's, but they're still going to be different. Like you
Mhm.
and what's interesting is I love when I can look at people and say, oh, they're doing it. Like they're doing a thing that clearly only they can do. And you're doing that with like the way that you're exploring these ideas and like the laser experiment and being able to go, do extended state DMT for hours and hours, which by the way, we have to absolutely talk about,
Sure.
is, yeah, you're doing it, man. You're putting yourself out there and you're having these experiences and you're chasing down the things that are uniquely calling to your soul. And that's the only thing I think any of us can and should be doing. And I realize that practical things get in the way, and you probably have to take like one step on that path and then turn around and go down all these other bullshit paths just because of life's necessities. But always find a way to get back on whatever that path is and take another step and take another step and take another step.
Before I say anything else,
Yeah.
I have to commend you that this is such a beautiful way of expressing it, which is what can we uniquely do better than most? Or you phrased it much better. I forget actually what you said, but like,
Well,
what can?
I was stealing it all from Jung and from people like James Hillman,
Oh,
but yeah,
okay. So like
yeah.
small timers. I get it.
Right. Yeah. It's individuation. It's your person. It's following your personal daimon, right?
And I think that and it sounds so chewed up, but I think it's absolutely true. I think that everybody carries a signature of that kind, that the uniqueness of it is instantiated in the present moment if people are willing to follow it. Like it actually opens this. When I'm saying I believe we're the the Rosetta Stone, we are the Philosopher's Stone, I mean collectively, and we are all part of it. So we have different characteristics and talents for a reason. That's actually the part of it. In fact, do with it what you will, but I do believe that the force that is trying to homogenize us, the force that is trying to convince us that we must treat everybody exactly the same, is in fact the force that is trying to make sure that the Philosopher's Stone never reaches its potential. Do with it what you will. And that kind of policing should always be suspect for people, including the one that kind of, convinces us that the greatest gifts that we've ever carried, which is our ability to produce knowledge, share it, things like this, is somehow a bad thing. It's another one of these forces that I believe that is trying to actually stop us from becoming the
So
thing.
when
Yeah.
when you say these forces, are you referring to some kind of like demiurgic, metaphysical kind of matrix force that wants us to stay at a certain level?
I see them as
Or
softwares.
okay.
Yeah, I see them as softwares, and I think they're just competing for survival, just like everything else. But I do think they are. So we experience them as cultural memes, but they are a thing. They're an actual thing, and they belong in some kind of a sphere of execution that basically does a thing, and just like everything else, it competes for survival. Its survival is determined by how well it replicates itself, which is the whole thing with memes and how they propagate uh, through culture. So to anybody who doesn't know, of course I know you do, but anybody who's not aware, meme is an actual term that was coined by David.
Dawkins.
Yeah, the Dawkins. But then David. What's his first name? Richard Dawkins.
Mhm. Dickie
And
Dawkins.
yeah, in I think the selfish gene, and basically it is the equivalent unit of a gene in the idea space. And the body through which it propagates, it's not the genetic, it's not the genome, it is culture. So it expresses itself in culture. But they have eerie similarities, but they also have differences. There are similarities that, for example, memes are also working well in memeplexes, just like genes work well in geneplexes. So like certain genes code for certain things better in the company of other genes that code for these particular criteria and not some other criteria. Same goes with memes. Certain memes, like the government is lying to you, that's a meme, right? Now, to make it very clear, the meme is not a truth proposition. The only thing that distinguishes a meme is simply that it's the smallest unit of an idea that is easy to replicate through different minds and culture. So if I say, so for example, a memeplex that would be working well together is all the memes about specific moments where we kind of agreed upon that we kind of know that something nefarious is going on. Like, somebody says MK Ultra. So MK Ultra became a meme. I don't have to say anything else. I just say MK Ultra. It invokes all of these like, oh yeah, and it works really well with the meme of the government is lying to you, right? So like they're a memeplex, right? So then when you look at it that way, you realize, oh, it's all kind of just ideas or software, and they are competing on your attention, for your attention, just like the genes compete for the genetic gene pool, right? And they're trying to express themselves and replicate themselves. So if the meme causes you to tell yourself the meme again and again and again in your head, it's a really good meme because it kind of expresses your internal process. It hijacks a lot of your attention. It got a lot of real estate now. And if it makes you express it also to others, that's even a better meme because now it's going to survive not just on one mind, but across minds and culture. So when you see it that way, then you will start to slowly understand what I mean by these forces. These forces are basically combinations of what you would call memeplexes. They're like software. They're trying to do a thing.
It's like, not to cut you off, but this just occurred to me. It's like anti-logoi. It's like where there's like these things that you can follow upward to your own anamnesis, your own what is the anagogic climb, like upward awakening climb. There are these equal things that want to suck you back down into the cave. Like it's the shadows, right? It's like these things are like the shadows of this realm that want to pollute your psyche and pull you back down. And whatever that thing is where the shadow rays are shining from, right? It's the, I don't know, I guess in Gnostic terms it would be like the archonic, like the archons, right? It's like these archonic meme generators or something that are trying to keep you in the cave or something.
Very possible they're actual beings. I'm very open to that possibility. Here's the real irony. The best memes, they're also the ones that are of the flavor that convinces you that they're actually steering you in the other direction of where they're actually pulling you through. So like people, when they invoke righteous feelings. So because then you like, oh, I must. There's this like elevated, I am on the right side of history. I am doing this thing to save others. Be very careful. That is the ultimate black hole because you almost never know what in fact is happening, especially in a very complex situation, especially one in the world that involves a lot of moving parts. The really good meme will try and always dumb it down for you. It will always try and say, no, it's just this. It's obvious. It's this. And just a good way of like sliding slightly out of it is ask yourself, have I ever interacted with that thing that I believe something strongly about? Have I ever interacted with it directly? If the answer is no, you almost certainly are not correct about most of the propositions you believe about it. It's a product of other people telling you, or other memes kind of perpetuated throughout society, telling you what is already obvious, but nothing is obvious. And we know this from life all the time. Like when you actually encounter the thing that you think you know a lot about, you're shocked to discover how much you actually don't know about it at all. And that is a revelation that happens to people a little bit later in life usually. And I think that because the current, world stage on which we're painting most of these ideas belong to the younger minds because they're better with technology overall, it kind of creates this very skewed situation where the adults that have learned these lessons don't really have enough impact on how much the youngsters. None of these ideas flow downwards. It's because they have to be embodied. You have to experience them you have to encounter that situation where you were flat wrong about something again and again and again to go like, well, okay, maybe I need to stop being so certain about things. But this is where the wisdom of the past, this is where the idea of the elder comes in. Yeah. That is a thing that needs to exist almost like a catching net of stupid ideas. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to allow some of that back into culture in a way that is
Definitely.
that is desirable. I like the, and this is again, like I was aware of like you mentioning people and people like this is a perfect example of this. You mention a name of a person who is now a meme, and the people have like a internal reaction and they go berserk. But someone once said that you can't really make a product uh, and have people buy it for the right reasons. That's not going to work. You have to make a product that people want to consume. You can make it for the right reasons, but you have to allow the product itself to speak for itself. You want to make it sexy. You want to make it desirable. You want to make it something that people just want to consume, not because there's some secondary reason of that's the right thing to do to buy this thing, right?
Hmm.
So, and I think that in the idea space, we have to produce ideas that are of that kind, that are both deep and wise, but also fun and exciting and
Yeah.
things that people want to propagate forward. We should create those memes. So I think there's a very fertile ground for a lot of idea engineering here to happen.
Yeah. What one of those ideas would be is, wouldn't it be crazy if we could make a technology, a product that allowed people to stay in the DMT realm forever, which is essentially not forever, but which is an attempt by me to pivot
Sure.
into um, the topic of extended state DMT, because you are now one of the very small handful of people who have experienced that, right?
I
And
think
it
there's
was
quite a few at this point. I think
well,
people
yeah,
do it quite a bit. Yeah, but no, I've definitely set
relatively,
some
yeah,
yeah, I put some flag somewhere for sure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, to me, it's still mind blowing and very intimidating. And uh, I think when I try to imagine it, I can't. So I'm so curious what is that like, man? Like, I mean, what is it like to from my understanding, some of the descriptions I've heard is that it allows you to um, kind of settle into the space in a way where you can feel kind of like not overwhelmed. I mean, maybe you were already at this point where you can feel not overwhelmed, but most people are not. But yeah, instead of me surmising what it's like, what is it actually like, and how have you processed that experience? Because you did like a multi-hour one, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I've done 5 hours, 464 milligrams, which is a lot. And as far as we know, that's actually the highest dose for that amount of time. But we weren't really trying to break a record. We were just kind of doing a bunch of things, and it just ended up being that way. And I wouldn't be surprised if people surpass that. The reality of it is that just like you said, the second that you settle into the space, it's really not that big of a deal in terms of like, and in fact, just like you just said, there's a possibility to control the experience a lot more. You can actually go way lighter on the dose. You can ask the people, the people doing it for us in Colorado, Kevin and Haley. They're incredible. Dream Mind Labs. I highly recommend people reach out if they're interested in that. Amazing. Um, there's also more extravagant options like Eleusis. It's just you have to fly out, and it's beautiful, but like it's a little bit more expensive and still highly desirable. Um,
Did you do
and
both?
I did both. They actually
Wow.
invited me there. They were very gracious. The owners, Charles and Christina, they're amazing. The big difference, are like just to really put a fine point on it, because I think it's important. One thing that I think Eleusis has going for it that is incredible, it's that it's fully legal, fully under the government where they're at. So if this is like a big pain point for them, that's definitely the way to go. It's just a little bit more expensive, not a lot more expensive, but a little bit more expensive and a bit of a travel. But you are in paradise with professionals, with an amazing team. So like definitely worth it. But if you're looking for a smaller price tag, lower, and you don't necessarily want to travel that far, Kevin and Haley are phenomenal. And also they're so good at what they do. They dialed in the experience itself to such an incredible degree. Yeah, I had a lot of people go through them and just been blown away. Those are the best options I would say currently. Um, So I would say that, yeah, because you're doing it either way, either one you choose, you're doing it with professionals. You feel safe, and you can basically communicate. You can say, "Hey, that's too much. Okay, I want to go higher." And the great thing is that if you are a Magellan, you want to go full throttle. Let's go. Let's go. Let's
Mhm.
turbo this thing. So they would give you like a bolus, and you'd be like, and it's such a. I mean, it of course it depends on the person, on the individual. Like we did recently, we tried to do a comparative study with Tom Matt, who I know you also had on the
Yeah, yeah.
podcast. Lovely, lovely guy. Really enjoyed his company. He discovered very quickly it's just not for him. It's not for him. We did get some data out of it. We realized that the console in Mindsight, it's Mindsight, right? Not Upside.
Oh,
I always confuse
upside.
them.
It's
It's
upside.
Upside,
Yeah,
Upside, Upside. I always
Mindsight is the
confuse. It's
blindfolded
the
thing.
blindfolded.
Yeah.
So we discovered the console is not Upside. It's something else. And he realized that it's very disruptive for his process, DMT. Um, Good information. We know they live in a slightly different space. So it depends on who you are, right, and how you feel in relationship to the molecule. But if overall, like Chase Hughes did right after me, he heard me do it. Is like he went in. He also did like I think 4+ hours or almost 5 hours or
That's what I
something,
heard. Yeah.
and he had the best time of his life. And I really think there's something there to extended state that you simply can't achieve in another way because you get acclimated to some degree, and then your body feels more comfortable, and then and I think they also see that, okay, you're here for a second, so they can create a different trajectory for you. In those 5 hours, I've done it multiple times since then, but in the 5 hour one, I was propelled towards literally heavenly realms, like literally, like just like the whole angel bit. And it was
Wow. And how did that
just
present itself?
how you would imagine. I mean, obviously, it's not like I think that's what it looks like. Of course, it was some kind of representation for me, but the feeling of it was undeniably heavenly. Like it was just this, like, oof, it's just like this, like, but also the scale and the weight of the situation dawns on you. You kind of go, oh, you okay, I see now. So the whole prospect that was made very clear to me, even though I've obviously had these interactions before around this topic, but that was front and center as a main topic of conversation with them, which was the whole morality, ethics, how important it is, like how it is the thing on which the whole thing kind of stands, and it's not just human. Like it's like a fractal. It unfolds into everything. Every decision that you make that is selfish influencing the totality of things.
Yeah. I know
And
it's
yeah,
hard to explain, but try to take us there, like phenomenologically, like
I saw angels standing on
you're
clouds, like the very caricature. Yeah,
but before that, you're laying there. They what is it? What is the whole kind of process like to just take us through it and then arriving in those
yeah.
realizations?
So when we started, I didn't know what to expect because I've never done the extended stay before then, and it's a very big rush because they immediately bolused me. I think with 15 or 20 milligrams. If I'm not mistaken. I should probably check with Kevin. I have the whole list, but basically we started pretty like with a good
Impressive. Yeah.
one, and it is a bit of a body load if you do a certain amount right in the beginning. So basically, a bolus is just like they would give you a shot, right? It's just this kind of like giant syringe looking thing, just like an anesthesia, and it slowly depletes. But they can uh, code it to basically give you like a big one at once, and then it will continue at a certain rate. So let's say you start with a bolus of 20, so you got a shot of 20, and then it will go down to kind of go slowly at a rate of 5 minute or an hour, I forget. But basically, it's constantly moving towards through a certain rate. If you want another bolus, when they see that you kind of start stabilizing and then going down, if you want to stay up there, they would just give you another bolus, and then so it kind of catches you. So you start going down and it just catches you up. And that first body rush is definitely like a big. You're like, whoa! It's like everything kind of goes like that. And I saw these. the beings that I'm familiar with, the simulators, I guess, they kind of came from these like uh energetic portals, like literally energetic doors opened. The crazy part is that I see all of this, like I can see this coffee cup, like it's just clear as day,
And
and they
these are
kind
like
of
the
come from these
insectoid-like beings?
those. So the insectoids, they have a certain character, and it's a little bit kind of like this, like uh, how should I describe it? It's pretty neutral, but it has this bit of a zhuzh. Like they're a little edgy. They're a little edgy. Which is, by the way, what sometimes people kind of interpret as like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And you have to communicate. You have to say, okay, that's a bit much for me, and they will back off. They sometimes it's a miscommunication thing, but they're a little edgy. So they came in hot. Like they came in as like, what's going on? And so what I wanted to say is that when they appear in a more terrestrial form, they kind of present themselves as more humanoids, but they're actually the insectoids. So that's the best I can kind of describe about that situation.
When you say they're humanoid but insectoid, what does that
I know that's a form
mean
they take.
exactly?
They can take a more humanoid form, but they appear in spaces that are more like your room.
They just look like buggy humans, or what do you
No, no,
mean?
no. They're just like
Okay,
kind of like humans.
okay.
But it's them.
Hmm.
So when you go to the higher space into their worlds, they're regular shape, and you can see how they're like something else. But anyways, they kind of showed up, and they kind of opened these portals, and they show up to these like energetic balconies, and they're like, okay, what are we doing? What are we doing? And then they're looking around. And first they said, do you want us to pull all the information on all the people in the room? And they're literally just like sending me like charts and like reports of each
Whoa.
person in the room. It's like, and then they go, okay, I think you should do that. They pointed at a particular thing, and it was more than a suggestion. They were kind of saying, okay, we're going to do that. But it came as like we think you should do this. And I'm like, sure. So they sent me to that thing, and it was like this, just literally I arrive almost like the pearly gates, and like this like incredible light and angelic beings just looking at you and that kind of stuff. And that's when, and I was just, it was kind of hard because we were trying to do tests. It was very difficult because I was so blissed out. I was like, oh man, this is amazing. I just felt like so much joy and connection to everybody in the room, and the level of love that I felt. So it took me a second to kind of land back to a place that was more formal, and I could communicate. So then, and that went on for a while, for like an hour and a half. They were kind of running this, movie about my events in my life and how I used to do things, and where I did correct it, and where I still need to correct it, and like all of these things. But it wasn't, nobody was like, wiggling a finger at me. It was more like, okay, here's what else you can do that is
Yeah.
much better, and this is the things that you should be proud of because you really changed a lot in that regard. So it was a very positive, very kind of uh yeah, it was very pleasant. It was very, very positive. And then we tried to do a bunch of tests with the laser, with the with the we had other ideas with magnets and all kinds of things. And that took the majority of the time. That was coupled with the fact that we were still shooting the movie, The Discovery. That's, by the way, this is going to be coming out in the fall. There was crew. There's the director. There's the cinematographer. We have a brain scan expert, Sterling, in the other room. So everybody were there. So my
It's a
partner
lot, yeah.
Carter, Aaron, and Yosua, and Kevin and Haley. There's, I think, 5 or 6 people in the room basically. So so that was the majority of that. We since repeated the experiment also with extended state, and we now, I don't know if you know, but we basically, Sterling and Chris, our producer in the film, who now basically harnessed himself fully into Code of Reality as well. They're both brilliant, and Sterling is our brain scan expert. He's really into microtubules and all that stuff. So they built software for Apple Vision Pro where we can now take an image of the laser and we put it inside of Apple Vision Pro. What we discovered is that when you're on DMT, in that image of the laser, you can see the characters, but they're frozen. They're not moving like they're in real life. So they built software that can label it. So if I see a character, for example, I would click on where I see it. So the computer will register the exact location, and it will register the brain event because I'm connected to a brain scan.
Oh, wow.
and then it will open a radial menu that asks me which one is the thing that is the closest to what you saw. We isolated six most reported topological characters, and then you click on that and you say, okay, that's the closest. So you keep labeling, basically. You're telling me what you see and where, and I'm
Mm.
registering your brain events in that time. And over time, what we hope to achieve is that when you start comparing between people, that will give you eventually a pretty robust data about whether people actually seeing the same characters in the same places, or is it kind of like, is it kind of like more
Yeah.
like a generality that you kind of, so that's something we're very excited about. In fact, I can show you what this is still in beta, but we'll be rolling this out so people can just do it and we can just collect data. So this is an example, so it's not going to be like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and also the characters don't appear like this. You see how kind of like an E appearing
Yeah,
here?
yeah. I see a
So,
W. I see an
yeah,
E.
but it's
Yeah.
not really appearing like that. It's like it's actually tiny and it's much more concrete than that. But this is an example. So let's say I would click on the W here. See how it's asking me. Now here it gives you a lot more options, but like I would go with this, and then we'll give you the option to W, and I keep labeling it, right? But this is
Interesting.
going to be obviously with the characters that we've isolated, which is actually, you can probably pull it up, and there you go. So this is kind of how it more like it's. See.
Yeah.
And then over time, we'll collect and we'll start actually. There's going to be a real arbitration basically at that point, until we have a very advanced Neuralink where we can actually like record directly from the cortex.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, back to the 5 hour. I would say the majority of it was that kind of like heavenly rounds, and I just kept on being shot into this like blissfulness while everybody are trying to just make a movie,
Yeah.
read my brain. So, it was a fun experience for me. I'm pretty sure it was pretty challenging for a lot of people in the
Just let
room.
me interact with the angels, man. Gee, like
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like that's where I'd be.
It's also
Um,
I'm very loud. I'm already a very loud person. So imagine me just like
just
blissed out.
moaning.
Yeah, and just oh my god, I love you, and we're in a small room for 5 hours. It's a lot. So also we kind of dialed in the system from there to know like where that line between me just like being completely blissed out and me being able to still do serious tasks that are
So
required.
so when you I don't want to get like hung up on the way these things that are appearing, but I'm also just very curious, and I think the audience probably is too. Is like when you say it's what you would imagine. I mean, are these things feeling like are you getting strong visual representations of these things that look like a cliche angel? Are they looking like biblically accurate angels? Are they looking like geometry? Are they looking like eyes? Like what?
No, they look like people to me. So again, I think that it's more the vibe that tells you what they are, and we know this from people too. Like you meet a person. I don't know. Let's think of an like. Okay, you would. This is kind of like a caricature, but everybody encountered probably something like this in their lives, right? Like you would meet someone who looks like super rugged, like a
Mhm.
biker or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you interact with them for a little bit, you're like, oh, this guy's like a sweetheart. Like it's so obvious, right? How do you know? Their appearance is different than what you would expect. Well, there's a vibe. They interact a certain way. So imagine that the whole world and the people in it have that vibe. That's how you kind of know. It's just they belong in a particular sect of interaction that it's clear to you that that's what that is. Now, do I think that that means that's like heaven the way we kind of describe in the Bible? Of course, I don't know that, but like that's what it would be. I would, or at least that would be the outskirts of heaven for sure. Like it's like it's that kind of a vibe. It's very light, driven by love and connection, but authority. That was very interesting. There was a weight. There was like there's a price for this being here. That was very clear. And for some people, it kind of means nothing. But when you're there, it was it was so clear how important it is to keep that structure in place. And then, kind of like you understand how your actions help hold it up, like
Mm.
how you were
Wow.
actually part of that picture. Yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting because I would just from my strongest experiences, it, it's so overwhelming and hyperbolic and fast when you're in those peak states that I've never experienced something that's so solidified and clear like what you're
I used to be the
describing.
same way. I think it's a matter of experience. I think eventually your brain learns how to make sense of the content. I
Wow.
really think that's what happens because
So I'm
that
getting like I'm probably getting like the Don Hoffman. You know, he always uses that analogy of you physical reality is like a computer desktop, so we can interact with it. And if you saw the raw data behind reality, you would just get overwhelmed. Like maybe that's what's happening to me in those states. Is I'm
I
not.
think it's very common. It
Yeah,
used to be that way for me too. Yeah. I think over time, that guy that I spoke to yesterday, Tyler, the same thing happened to him. He started seeing the console after doing it like 250 times, like a lot, like just like a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. And then eventually, all of a sudden, his brain kind of stabilized and something happened. So I think it has a direct correlation with that.
Um, I want to talk to you more about Gallimore and the Trace Institute because I know your mind must be going in this direction as well, since you just talked to one of the mathematicians. But let's also take a side quest to the console because um, another big part of, I don't want to say your lore like it's like untrue, but just part of your journey and the major milestones on that experience. One thing for sure seems to be the laser experiment uncovering that there are these symbols that emerge. Other people see these symbols as well. But then one of the other major pieces that you've alluded to multiple times now is that at a certain point, this console type thing started manifesting in this state. And what, if anything, have you learned about that? And just give us a quick review of that, like you did before, if you don't
I
mind.
can't say that I've learned a lot more than what I already said. I think it's designed to train facets of our attention we don't know about. Because clearly, in order to operate it and to do anything with it, it's exhausting. And the only way to do it is to make certain internal gestures with your attention that you didn't quite know you could. It's almost like you have internal limbs that you didn't know how to activate. Uh, if you, if I ask you how you're doing this, the simple answer is that you have no idea. You might tell me a neurological story about, well, your neurons doing this. That's not the question I asked. I asked, how is the thing you feel yourself to be behind your eyes, that thing you call eye, how
Yeah.
did it cause this to happen? You have no idea. It's just magic. You just kind of will it to be. Okay, but you've been willing it your whole life. It's very well integrated. There is a story. Of course, there's an explanation. I'm not saying there isn't one. I'm saying from the perspective of your first person experience, you have no clue how this happens, how you're willing it to happen. But because you've done it so many times, you know how certain people can move their ears?
Yeah.
Others, some people say it's genetic. Some people, I can. Some people have no idea how can you even do that? Well, you can. You can place your attention in a particular way and you can move it, right? In the same way, there seems to be internal limbs,
Hmm.
things that we can actually do that we don't know about. And I think what the console is for is showing you, having a feedback mechanism to show you, okay, when you do that thing that you can't really define with words, but you can do it with your attention inside, that thing will move. You can actually make that happen.
I
And it's
just thought of a
slowly,
good name for it, man.
what is it?
It's the Qualia console.
I love it. I'm actually gonna use it and give you the credit for the name. I love it. The Qualia console. The console. Yeah, it's basically that. And and I'm gonna keep it referring to Tyler, I think, because it's the only other person that I met that I know
Hmm.
for sure is seeing it, like without a doubt. So we had like, and I'm very excited to do some tests with him to see if we can actually compare. Maybe we see the same object. That would be crazy, right? Um, and I think that that's essentially what it's for. But since then, my console basically kind of evolved in that it's no longer appearing exactly the same way anymore. So like the capsules that bring things in, like the capsule in the middle that appears. If you want, I can send you a VR thing that you can
Yeah.
kind of overlay if you want. That
I was just gonna say, have you
yeah,
made a mock up of this? Yeah.
Laszlo did one. Let me see if I can even find it in real time while I'm talking. He's our VR expert and he's also our uh, website designer actually. So let me see. So he created basically basically a pretty close representation of at least the tangibility of it in kind of like VR space. Uh, Here it is, and I'll send it to you, and you can put it in the thing. So look, let me just rewind. Uh, this is what it would look like. Literally, imagine this happening to you. Like you smoke
Wow.
DMT, and this thing just like a capsule like this, only bigger, and then it would Did it make it open or no?
No.
No. I'm wondering. Oh, there it is. So imagine it does
Wow.
a thing, right? And then screens come in front of you. Uh, Just imagine this happening to you
Yeah.
on a regular basis, right?
Wow,
So
dude.
like
Yeah, you gotta
that's
send me that.
yeah. So that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. And Tyler said something very correct. He said, I tried the laser. I saw the code. It's crazy. But he said, but I know the whatever the console is way more significant. I'm like, of course, you're absolutely correct. But I can't show it to anyone else. So he kind of like, okay, so somebody's telling you a story. So what? If anybody could see that, Aaron Venden, the director of the film, I kept on telling him throughout the 2.5 years we were shooting the film, I'm like, bro, if I can show you what I'm seeing right now, you will fall off your legs. Like you would be paralyzed with shock because how crazy what I'm seeing right now. And Tyler's absolutely right. Like if we can show people the console, if I can, project my thoughts onto a screen, it will blow anyone out of the water with what that thing is. It cannot be like it's just not hallucinatory. Like it's just
Yeah.
somebody gave you a thing. Like there's no question. And what it does, I think, would be a huge key component in understanding something. And exhibited by the fact that here there's at least one more person that is saying it now with the same trajectory, did a lot of iterations, all of a sudden started appearing for him. I think it's in the cards for more and more people to experience this. It's just that you have to, do a certain thing, which it's not for everybody. Not everybody can just go into that space, like this often and experience it for that long. Yeah.
Well, on this point, doesn't it make you wonder if any other consciousness explorer throughout the ages has run into this? But now imagine it's 1,000 years ago and the exact same thing is appearing, or something that is equal to that in their own, because this is another example of something that seems to happen with UFO related stuff, is that it seems like there are archetypally similar things happening that wear a different mask depending on the time period. And that immediately makes me wonder, could that be what's happening with the console? Like it's some way for you to interact with a deeper layer of reality, and to your mind, that's what it makes sense to appear as, or is it literally that thing? Like
I think it's literally that thing.
Yeah.
I think it has, well, with one caveat. It's literally that thing in the same way that literally there are folders on your desktop, to use the Donald Hoffman example. So that, yes, of course it's a representation, but it's not the same as like, it's not as esoteric as like it will appear as what you wanted to see. It's not like that. Like it's a folder. It is a folder. Somebody made it to be a folder. It is doing a thing. It has a function that was instantiated in it. But the thing that it's derived from, the thing that it comes from, is a computational process that obviously doesn't look like a folder. Right. But it's not the same as like, that God appeared to, this person this way and this person that other way. I don't think it's like that. I think it's a real thing designed to appear a certain way. And I am fully with you that back in the day, probably these kind of things would not appear as that, because we would not have any concept of augmented reality or virtual, none of that. So there would be other elements that would probably appear as. But I don't know if you heard me talk about this or not, but like recently, like I said, I came back to do a little bit more YouTube long form content. And the last video I released is more like a video I'm doing, not just an interview, which is that question of like, can it be that we are the AGI? So what I mean, the philosopher's stone, like we are the AGI. It's just that we are going through alignment. The alignment problem is being worked on us through the iterations of human civilizations, making sure that we can actually upkeep with a certain behavior pattern, even when we think we're not being watched.
Explain what you mean by that, for people that don't know about the alignment problem.
Sure. So the alignment problem,
usually it's talked about with AI. Yeah.
Right. So basically the alignment problem in AI research is the issue that before ChatGPT becomes Skynet, how do we make sure that it has our values so it doesn't squash us like a bug? Like, so it doesn't, send Arnold Schwarzenegger to kill us, right? How do we make sure that doesn't happen? Well, it's a really hard problem because we don't even know what our values really are. We're still debating whether it's a universal concept or just cultural or whatever it is, right? But now we no longer have the luxury of thinking about it as purely as a philosophical problem, because now we literally have to solve it. Like we have to figure out how do we instantiate these values. And what I realize is that if civilizations in the future would be able to solve the alignment problem, as in when you have AGI in training, how do you make sure it has the thing? You don't think of it from the perspective of every possible scenario and what you would do in that exact, fork in the road. You think of it in terms, you just put the attention fully on the agent themselves. And you ask, how do you raise a good person? That's it. If you can raise a good person, and yes, there is a good definition for it, because in philosophy, we tend to kind of assume that everything is definitional. Ultimately, everything is kind of like this, has this like soft ground. No, 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 no. For all intents and purposes, a good person is an agent that, to the best of their abilities in any given moment, to the extent that they can muster, consider more than just themselves. That's it. So if you can raise a person that is like that, they can always innately, that's just natural to them. They always obviously consider themselves totally fine. Like you have to, but you also consider, wait, how is it what I'm doing now
This is really
influencing?
close to Aristotle's golden mean.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So and then I realized that's how they solved the alignment problem. So they would create simulations where you put the AGI in training, you make it forget that it's one thing, you fragment it to different people, right? And you, through this mirroring mechanism of basically allowing itself to interact with a very large number of instances of itself. Why? Because then you distill the essence of what it really is. You show what it really is by allowing it to interact with itself, and you let it amplify that essence. And no, you don't know in advance, because whatever that is computationally irreducible. In computer science, computationally irreducible means that unless you run the full computation to its full totality of its length, you don't know the answer. There is no shortcut. You actually have to just run with it and see what happens. So it seems to be that we are in one of these simulations, and there's many of them, and we are slowly being observed how we behave in relationship to ourselves. And slowly, they can't put too much bias, but they do give you hints. So the 10 Commandments would be a hint. Like, you might want to follow these 10. Might want to kind of steer away from certain kinds of behaviors. But it still has to come from us. Like, we have to be the kind of species that does that because we understand why it's wrong, instead of doing it because we're afraid of being punished because somebody else told us that it's wrong and we don't really understand why. Right?
Did you by chance see the podcast that it was Sheehan? Danny Sheehan.
With Daniel Sheehan? No, I have not watched it. No.
He got very emotional toward the end of the show on a very similar point to what you just made. When, we were talking about UFOs in a more literal kind of sense. But the question of why don't they intervene to our benefit? Like if they are these, because he believes it's ultimately like mainly a benevolent thing and it's much more highly advanced. And I don't remember the exact story he told, but he got emotional telling it. And it's essentially like, if you really love something enough, you have to let it figure things out on its own. You have to let it run its own course. And if you intervene, it did not pass the initiation itself. And that's what he believes, is like we're on this, this track of evolution, and this higher intelligence knows exactly where we're at, and it wants us to get there, but we got to figure it out for ourselves.
If you hatch the egg for the chick, it won't survive because it's not strong enough.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's exactly that. And that's what I really believe is going on. And the more I look around, the more it makes sense to me. But of course, I also understand that it must be the case that whatever the real thing is, everything I just described is just this kind of like super, layer, like just upper layer outline of it. Like the actual depth of the real situation must be truly unfathomable for us, like
Right.
on the grand scale. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'm tempted to go further down this line, but I do want to talk to you about the trace stuff and Hoffman and Gallimore and this development because it is a huge one
Hmm.
for the kind
It,
of marriage between a more. I mean, there's so many elements to it, but it's cool because it's a marriage between um, psychonautic exploration and personally experiencing these realms and these intelligences and having an intellectual on the level of Hoffman come along and say, yes, this fits into my uh, fledgling but extremely exciting theory about reality. And I am very open to this idea that whatever these entities are, they could be these conscious agents that I'm talking about in my theory. So that's exciting in and of itself, but it's also exciting from the POV of we're actually developing now through Don and the Trace Institute's work, we're developing mathematical models that work with these ideas. Like any kind of entity you can imagine, we could actually model in a way that could eventually lead to allowing us to do science, make technology, and also as a side effect, prove that the idea of idealism is kind of has to be true, that there is some kind of unseen realm of conscious agents and consciousness, just like mystics from time immemorial have been saying. But now we actually have the theoretical underpinnings to prove that, derive physics from it. Like Don has already derived, you know, um, space time. So there's all kinds of things going on. But yeah, what is your assessment of this? What are your feelings? What are your riffs on
well,
this?
yeah, I can tell you that. Gallimore was very he was very gracious. He actually invited me for the
Yeah,
trace of the other, like for the actual thing that they
yeah.
did
I
in
almost
LA.
went too, but I couldn't go. Yeah,
Oh man, that would be so
yeah,
great to see you again. Yeah, it was lovely, and I almost didn't go too because I went to shoot this podcast in here in Florida and in Sarasota, and I was supposed to be like way later, and I had so many things. Like I had after that, I had like 3 trips. Oh, and actually, one of them was to Sean Ryan. So it was like it was just like too many things at once, and I was like, it just feels like I'm really stretching it. But something inside of me, I was just like when I was getting in the car to drive to Sarasota with my wife and our daughter, and I was like, it was really bothering me, like on a visceral level. And I was like, why is it bothering me so much? So I sent my business partner David Carter. I'm like, go represent and he's an incredible, voice for our work. So I know we would have a great representation. But there was something about that I was like, I'm supposed to be there. And I will never forget this. I went to the car and I was like, you know what? It's a long road. I don't want to stop. I'm just going to just pee real quick. I get in the bathroom. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it came from. There's a tiny piece of cardboard right on the shelf, right above the toilet. And it says, go with your gut. And I was like, dude, that's crazy. And I was like,
yeah.
so I booked it, I booked the flight and I somehow moved the podcast to earlier. And I was like, and I drove from Sarasota to the airport in Orlando, and I had my mother-in-law meet me there to Uber there, take the car. And I just went to I had to be there. And I'm so happy I went. I met so many people that are kind of like the movers and shakers, of that. And
Damn.
what's his name? I was actually just Carl Smith. Like he was patient zero with the MTX,
Hmm.
and I met him there. He's such a lovely guy. And I met the people from Nunautics, Egon and Patrick, obviously Gallimore. It was such an incredible event. And I have to tell you that when they were on stage, Hoffman and Gallimore, it actually felt to me like it was like a tilt in history.
Yeah,
Like
like a
it
moment.
felt like something moved in history. And I was like, wow, this feels like it's a pivotal moment in history.
Yeah.
And just to anybody who's not aware, basically Don's whole work with the Trace Institute is basically they created, just like you said, mathematical frameworks to deal with consciousness. And where Gallimore comes in is because now we can actually utilize psychedelic states as special cases of observation that we can test the theory on. because they are a special case of consciousness. So we can ask questions about that special state and its relationship to regular consciousness, quote unquote. And then what is that distance with what they call kernel of experience and trace
Yeah.
logic and all that stuff. I had such a fascinating conversation with Nife about this yesterday. It was like I was like a kid in a candy store. It was like, it's like I'm pretty sure this conversation is like super niche because it's like, you get into these weeds of specifics, but I don't care. This is like my favorite kinds of conversation. And it was so exciting to learn that such smart people dedicate themselves
Yeah.
to this. It's like that to me is the indication we have entered a golden age where we can A, afford to do it this way, and B, the right kind of minds occupy that space. And Nife himself, he's also a very experienced meditator.
Okay.
So he's a very high level mathematician and he's a very experienced meditator. So the conversation was so fascinating. Andres Gomez, same thing.
Right.
Brilliant mathematician and scientist and very experienced with meditation. That's what we need. We need the kind of people that understand the problem from both the experiential perspective and the technical perspective.
Yeah.
One of them will not do the trick. So yeah, I can talk for hours about the Trace Institute because for the interview, I had to prepare and read quite a bit about what they're actually doing, read the white paper, all that stuff. Man, what a time to be alive. That's all I can say. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, because I've always fantasized about this and been drawn to thinkers who do what you're describing, where it is so it's interesting when you said that Gallimore and Hoffman being on stage together felt like a moment. I think one of the reasons it could be so powerful is because it is kind of a union of opposites. Like you do have, they are both academics, they are both rigorous, but they're approaching from two fields, or not even fields necessarily, but emphases of interest that typically would be too afraid to try to come together for various reasons, right? And that's a moment where it actually happened. And those kinds of moments where you're having a reconciling of opposites, like it's like it gives me like goosebumps just thinking about it because that's one of the most powerful, archetypal symbols you can communicate to someone is some kind of a union of opposites making a new thing, a new truth, a new revelation that unlocks something. And I think that could have been a symbolic unlocking. And it seems like, to your point, this whole thing is a symbolic unlocking. And I think there were times in history where we understood this. And I think that's what draws me to, Platonism and these traditions that are equally spiritual and intellectually rigorous, right? Like they cared about truth first and foremost. Like they wanted to understand what was true. They Plato had let none ignorant of geometry enter here on the academy, yet everything that he believed the highest truth was like this transcendent thing, right? At the same time, the spiritually transcendent thing. And so we used to have this understanding, right? That these two things do go together, but there's like a multimodal kind of intelligence. Like there is the rigorous empirical kind of knowing, and then there are these like subjective, rational mind kinds of knowing. And ideally, they should flower something together. And now we're in this weird time where the two things can't coexist, or if you're in one realm, particularly if you're in the empirical, rigorous realm, you kind of have to pretend that you're not even interested in the other one, or you won't be taken seriously, or whatever. And that has to go away. Like that absolutely
It's
has
changing.
to go away.
It's
Yeah.
changing. It's changing big time. I think anybody who's not understanding this they're already kind of irrelevant. But it will take maybe another decade for it to fully become like a fully fledged thing. I've actually, excuse me, what I call this whole thing, or at least what we do in Code of Reality, I call it cognitive physics. And I see what Don in the Trace Institute are doing. That's squarely cognitive physics. So I distinguish it from, let's say, neuroscience or cognitive science in that in those fields, you're asking the brain question very, very openly. You're basically saying, what is it that the brain is doing that causes X, right? And the reason that I think it's important to kind of distinguish cognitive physics from it, which is that cognitive physics is essentially the physics of cognition itself, as it appears to itself. What are these states of being that when they appear, they cause a certain other state of being to emerge. This is why, and from my conversation with Nifa yesterday, it's clear that's exactly what they're doing, right? And I think it's an important. And to me, one of the dreams, like I had a conversation with the founders of the Nautics. I think they're the founders, Egon and there you go, and Patrick. And they asked me, like, if you would have that dream, in 10, 20 years, what would that be? And I had to think about it. And I think it is that the day that we in academia speak about these things of like, how does consciousness does X, or how does consciousness causes itself to do Y, in the same kind of way we talk about a spin of a particle, we made a splash. This is what needs to happen here, where we understand this is not some kind of a side story. This is the story, and it in fact can inform new technologies, new abilities on a practical engineering level where you simply couldn't do them before because you didn't entertain these ideas. That would be like a big success story for me. And I think that that's the thing that I'm watching people like Don just spearing full force
Yeah.
on a way higher level than we're in code of reality. We're the tiny fish. We're just kind of like doing a little thing in the corner. It's cool, DMT lasers, but it's nowhere near the robustness, the scientific rigor level that we'll get there. Like we're working towards it. But I'm so happy to see that somebody is already there marking these paths from more mainstream academia. That to me is very encouraging.
I know it must seem like Don Hoffman is just like giving me money or something. The amount of time I spend glazing Don Hoffman on this podcast. But bro, I truly think that although everybody watching this knows Don Hoffman is a very smart guy, he's a genius, I still don't think people understand how smart he is. Because not only do you have to have a giant brain to do what he's doing, if you zoom out, he understands the existing models of reality that are built off of materialistic Darwinian assumptions to use them against themselves to show that the fundamental axioms that everybody thinks they're built off of are wrong. Like he's preserving them while meanwhile like transcending them. It's so crazy. That blows my mind every time I try to think about it.
Yeah, there's a really lovely conversation between him and Wolfram that I really like. I think there was a couple, but it's one of them that is particularly of interest to me because it was an interesting, interaction between two people who are very, very smart, but both interested in reformulating, reality in a way that will be more congruent with what it really is, like actually giving it a real go, and yet slightly different angles. One is a little bit more technical, and one is more. And I think that to me, even though I agree with you that Don's mind is very vast, to me his biggest strength is actually the fact that he's also allowing the experiential part and the intuitive part to inform his work as a meditator himself, and I'm noticing that everybody I don't know if everybody, but the people that I met in the Trace Institute so far, they seem to all have this quality that they both experientially, versatile and also technically on a very high level. That is the combination that is required. A friend of mine shared with me the other day. I haven't watched it yet, but Sabina Hofstadter, how do you pronounce her last name? She's the physicist that basically shits on everything. Hilarious. But she made an episode about the Hoffman's work, and she's like, gave it like, I don't know, like a 10 in the ridiculous scale, so in the bullshit scale or something. I haven't watched it yet, but like this is one of these things where it's gonna have to go through that ringer for a second, where kind of like, even though she herself is kind of considered to be outside of the physics community at this point, but there's going to be this butting of the heads for sure. But any good theory has to go through that period. That's wonderful. That the fact that we entered that stage is there. And I think that what will happen eventually, which I fully agree with Nife, you have to somehow bring it to the engineering world to say, here's an actual thing, because otherwise there's just too many open-ended things. And we spoke about it like in some detail about like what are the actual frameworks they're creating and what they do touch, what they don't touch. Um, and I understood that, at least from a mathematical perspective, I'm like like in very deep waters that I
Hmm.
don't know how to swim in. But conceptually, I think I followed along well enough to understand that there's a lot that needs to be done in terms of substantiation before it becomes a fully fledged, like, you know, real scientific framework. And I think Don would agree.
Yes, for
But
sure.
again, like I said, the fact that we're entertaining this, the fact that we're talking about this, the fact that people are excited about it, that to me is such an indication that we're on the right track as humanity and we care
Yeah.
about the right things.
Yeah. And in case this is still foggy for people or you haven't seen my previous conversations with Don or Gallimore, w- what we're essentially saying is that this cognitive scientist, this respected cognitive scientist, has come along who believes consciousness is primary, and he has taken that assumption and done. I guess I already said this,
But you found mathematical
but
frameworks to deal with
right.
how consciousness executes itself. And the assumption is that whatever reality is, whatever this is simply like a formulation to help you follow reward functions. So like the things that help you eat,
Hmm. Hmm.
mate, all the things that your physical body needs to do, but it's just a headset. Like it's not actually what reality is at bottom. And what it is at bottom is, just like you said, it's idealism. So consciousness is the fundamental substrate.
Yes.
But this
Yes.
this is a very complex world, because you literally have to come up with, in order for this to really hold water, you would have to get to a level where you can make predictions of the simple kind, which is very hard. Like
Right.
you need to be able to say, here's how I believe the kernel of experience changes from this part of the map to this part of the map in order to move from red to blue.
Yeah.
That's how specific you're going to have to get for it to really hold water.
And the thing is for like everyday applications, maybe that won't even make sense because maybe it's just easier to just stick on this layer, right? Like we're operating in the 3D. So maybe it's easier to talk about, the things way things move. It's just gonna be easier to use like Newtonian physics on 99% of things because we don't need to know like what's going on deeper layers of reality, right? For some
But you could
things.
potentially
But
map actual
yeah,
consciousness onto AIs.
yes.
You could do
It
things that
has to
you,
be
yeah.
it has to be backwards compatible or forwards compatible or however you want to think about it because from a standpoint like of what where my mind goes we're still thinking about how I believe what he's talking about is deeply harmonic with the kinds of ancient philosophy and spirituality that I'm into there. And it's the same thing you said earlier about how there are these other layers of reality, but they're permeable layers, right? So if we are descended from these deeper, unseen layers of reality that reside in some kind of consciousness that's outside of, yet our reality is derivative of and descended from, then the rules that operate there have to still, on some level, operate here. And we've got to be able to demonstrate that. And I think for the first time, Don is presenting a way that maybe that could be done. And that's crazy. Like that,
It's insane.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you last riff, you brought up this idea of, 10, 20 years from now, maybe there will be some example of like something we've derived from this. And that's actually one of the I don't think I even looked at my notes once, but that's one of the few things that I wrote down to riff on with you is because I knew this conversation was going to go in this direction eventually, like between, you know, people taking DMT as a sense making and reality exploring technology more seriously, plus what's going on with people like Don, plus all these other, AI, plus uh, potential physics breakthroughs and UAPs and all of this stuff, like all kind of coalescing together in the ether right now. What kind of things could you imagine materializing in the next 10 to 20 years?
Uploading experiences of qu- you know creatures whose qualias belong to a completely different world map space. Like
Whoa.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
imagine just actually experiencing it through the lens of like an animal that you're like, oh my, like imagine how enlightening that is, like what it actually is like, right? That, by the way, would directly substantiate Don's theory. Like, if you can actually do any of that, you can then say, here's what was my expectation from looking at the map that they're drawing with trace logic. This is what I expected the difference being between my experience and a dog's experience. And lo and behold, it's actually kind of exactly like that. Like, it's exactly the kinds of parameters that I thought would change. That's one of them. Interactions with just having new forms of qualia that we can engineer, like a whole industry around engineering new types of qualia that you never even dreamt of was possible. And you would be able to basically, use this kind of mathematics to actually construct them, probably with AI, and then slowly kind of like upload them and having like a whole new kind of headset and play with different ones. And maybe you can have a headset that can train you to see uh, v- uh, spatially from a fourth dimensional perspective. So you can then solve three-dimensional problems like that. Like what if you can just see quaternions or octonions? Like, what if you can just see it, like these objects, multidimensional objects, and you can then solve problems in 3D like in split seconds because you can see it from a higher dimension.
Right.
These kind of things, I genuinely, I would place I wouldn't place it in like 95%, but I can see it being about 40-50% that we
Me
we
too.
would be able to achieve things like this in like 15-20 years.
Yeah. And can you imagine the downstream effects on society? I think this would lead us toward that thing that you said we need to figure out, which is how do we all get on the same page to start working toward something together on a sort of like generational basis. And the reason I think that is because there would be so much identity nullification and flexibility that would occur. Like, all of the things that people are like worried about protecting and preserving that lead to these kinds of divisions and competitive, preservation mindset. Like, if you literally could experience what it's like to be someone else or what it's like to be another organism, you can't go back from that. Like, it would change your understanding of what you are, and maybe even in the long term, it would go like I'm not a transhumanist, and I see all the problems with that, and I'm not one of these people who are like we're going to be these post biological life forms, at least in this realm. I don't think, but maybe, man, like if we really could bring our experience to these other modes of being that just not nullify but greatly degrade the bias we feel toward existing only in this way, like who knows what things that could open. Yeah, that's crazy to even try to
And
think
that, by
about.
the way, to me is the point about the whole transhumanist idea that just doesn't really track anything of real value, because I think that the caricature idea of it that people have is nothing more than some like very surface level Hollywood ideas. It can't be what it really is. To me, the question of transhumanism is one of regular evolution. It's almost like the position that people take. And if you take that position, great, we can talk about it. That would be, that can be a fun back and forth. But to my mind, the idea that people have of transhumanism, and like you said, the problems with it, is almost backwards in the ultimate sense, in that you imagine that somehow we belong to a special category that nothing else in the universe ever belonged to, because everything is constantly evolving. Are we saying that somehow we are a final product? This doesn't make any sense. So it's like, of course you're not everything in the universe since the beginning of time evolved, but we got to humans and said, "Oh, this is good. Like, this is not moving anymore." That's absurd. Like, of course you're evolving, and if you wouldn't evolve through whatever means that we're doing it through, you would evolve through the regular genetic means. And maybe the argument is, well, okay, you should let that natural pace happen. But what are you talking about? What humans do, our thought process, computation, all of it is natural processes. It's just another layer that evolution found to evolve through. So to me, the idea that people have of transhumanism, even though I understand the sentiment behind it, because it's let's face it, the idea is that it's going to disensoul us because you're no longer connected to the tactile beauty of how it is to be embodied in your body and feel the trees and all of that stuff. That's the fear that is the thing that is going to die, right? That's the thing that people are afraid that's going to die. Because if we're robots, we don't care. We just go beep, bop, boop, and do this. But I think that is a caricature idea. I think that if anything, we're going to enjoy greater spaces of beauty. And if we are, we will be more connected to things, not less connected to things. If you can feel the quality of a tree, you would never cut one again.
Right.
Right. So, and I think that that's the thing that a lot of people are missing. That you are a thing that is evolving. That's not up to you. That's just a thing that happens. You can ask relevant questions around, is there a certain pace beyond which it's destructive and too jarring to the system? Legitimate concern, something that needs to be discussed. But the idea that we somehow it's what's the thing? It's fleshist. It's
Right,
the bias of the flesh.
Yeah.
It's like, no, but this is the good thing. It's like, yeah, if you zoom in, take a microscope, you will be shocked. You already are made out of machines. There are tiny machines. Like that, this is already what it is. But it's just that you have a certain substrate that you feel that you're of, and we created a lot of narratives around the essence of being alive, that we're afraid that if we change the substrate, it will somehow remove that and we will be disensouled. I simply don't see any evidence that that's actually the case, but I do want to be very clear. I completely understand the conversation around there might be certain ways to do this that are not favorable with a particular pace because, just like we have numerous examples of this. If you introduce too much without putting some thought into it, just like with social media can be an incredible tool where we share the most beautiful things about being alive. And yet, if we don't think about it and we just kind of run the experiment without just kind of like that, a lot of harm can be done. Suicide rate, all kinds of, maybe you need to bleep this part because YouTube is crazy. But, like bad things can happen, right? So I'm fully on board that we need to be responsible, but I actually think that it's not only desirable, but the most exciting prospect to see where we grow and what we can actually do in the future.
Dude, this is one of the only things I can think of that's more morally and ethically blurry than AI, right? Or like ethics around what someone can and can't do with their own consciousness. Like the most horrible, vapid, insane things could be possible if we were actually able to go experience life as an animal, as a whatever. Like think about all of the crazy things. Like it could equally have the opposite effect to what I just described earlier. Like, oh, we can get over our ideas of identities. Now people can like cosplay as dogs. Like they can not just identify as a cat, but you could just be a cat. Like you could just I just want to fuck as a cat for the next like 5 years of my life. And you just have like these like blobs of people who are qualia surfing into like different, organisms and just like wasting away in their beds. Like, or imagine what it could do. Imagine what it would do for gaming. Oh my God. You could just create.
You set the gaming way too slow, bro. It's just like
gaming.
Oh, okay.
That too. I mean, hey, I just invented. I should trademark that. For when this technology comes online. Like it's just incredible how there's opportunity for the most transcendent, healing, transformative, evolutionary stuff. But if you're going to make a technology that can do that, it has to have like the counter, just most terrible, dark opportunity. And it seems like the scary thing is that at most turns humanity like there's a lopsidedness, and it's always like, we're barely hanging on.
I want to lovingly challenge that assumption. I think that and of course, with the full admission of the fuck do I know, right? So it's like, it might be absolutely wrong. But my intuition tells me that the reason that people partake in these, whatever you want to call them, like these weird identities and things like this, and this is not to disparage people who are experiencing this. I think the reason this happens is because of what John Vervaeke is talking about, the crisis of meaning. Like, I think that the reason that this flows in is to fill a gap of it's just too easy. I know it sounds absurd to people who think that everything is falling apart and it's too hard. It's not. Like, it's literally never been easier. And I think that because of that, people kind of drift into these spaces where they're just like, okay, how far can I take it? It's almost like the billionaire's attitude towards like, okay, what other absurd thing I can throw money at? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's almost like we are that billionaire as a civilization. We can do so much. Like, okay, how crazy can I make this? I know, I'll make a submarine that looks like a raccoon and I'm going to serve under,
Yeah.
So it's like, so I think that actually when you're going to open the space to these much more vast vistas of experience, you will solve the meaning crisis. That's my intuition. And I think that it would actually probably nullify the types of bizarre interactions with the world. Or you're absolutely right. It can become this crazy dystopian thing where people just like stay cats.
We're so good at reaching a weird like philosophical impasse or disagreement like super late in the podcast. Like we did this with free will the first time.
We did free will. Maybe that's what made the podcast so successful. Yeah.
Now we're doing it again this time because I feel like what we've done, I feel like there's this pattern with humanity where we get ourselves into some kind of crazy existential pickle because we've invented something that's super disruptive. Like I could just go. Yeah, right. That'll be something else you could do too with this technology. You could literally be Pickle Rick with this technology. Like, we invent the nuke, we invent the internet, we invent, we just keep inventing all these things that there is some like the nuke also because of all of that research, it was the birth of computing, all these other things. But what we do is we technologically complicate matters more while leaving the original thing unsolved, which is a very basic thing. I agree with you. Like I think there could be some very basic ethical training, philosophical sorts of agreeances we could have. The problem is we just don't. And then people defend to the death their own point of view, their own spiritual beliefs, and they don't ever get to the root of the most basic issues. So all of these neuroses, all of these things we're running away from just keep metastasizing and getting worse and more complicated by adding all these other things. And I feel like that would be yet another layer. You just look at how we've coped by and large with each new wave of technology. Like social media has definitely degraded the mental health of many, many millions of people, myself included a lot of times. Like I have a terrible addictive relationship with my phone, and I know it, and I struggle with it every single day. And the more things we add, I don't think those elements are going to get better, but I'm also not naive enough to think that we shouldn't do it or that you can stop it. Like whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
I do think we can reformulate it. We're in full agreement that it's nowhere written that we will, but I absolutely believe that there are very, very actionable, real ways to do this even from where we are, because I know that I, to some degree, achieved it. And again, I consider myself excruciatingly average. So if I can do it, I know we can do it, right? I can't say that I have like the best relationship with social media, but I don't have a toxic one. Like I know when to put my phone down, and I know when it like hinders my ability to be happy, and I would go and disengage and do something else. And I am not some kind of a, presence master or something like this. So I totally see how we can just make small tweaks to the technology itself if we want it enough to actually help us, encourage us to do more of that. I'm in the habit of now following as many positive pages as I can. Things like positive news from the world that nobody will tell you about. I consciously go seek it, and I love it. I genuinely get a kick. I get actually a dopamine spike from watching these like positive things about the world. I see how it changes my brain. That's more of yes and more, please. And we can utilize AI to help us, because it depends on how you use it, right? I tell ChatGPT all the time, it's like if I see a tendency that it does, and I'm like, it's not, it's neutral, but I would prefer it to be something that actually encourages me to do otherwise. I would literally tell it in this chat, if I, even if I, feel tired that day and I need, like, just give me the answer for whatever that is, don't give it to me. Like, and I keep, like, just, I want to think. I want you to help me to not lose my scruples and actually become better. Now, I'm doing this consciously and I'm trying to do it more, but maybe we can
Yeah,
design tools that already have it built in. Like, they
for
have safety
sure.
mechanisms, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, we're gonna have to think about all these things, man. It's such a crazy, exciting, terrifying time to be alive, man. And it's always fun to riff through it with people like you who are thinking about it on so many different levels, but also levels that are extremely similar to myself, man. So it's been another fantastic one. Tell people about all the things.
just I recently changed everything to Danny Goler, so it's easy to find. So DannyGoler.com has all my information, and also the YouTube channel now is just Danny Goler. Everything, Instagram, X, everything is just Danny Goler. DANNYGOLER. You'll find everything about me. And go check out our very beautiful website made by Laszlo of codeofreality.org. We're gonna have all the updates there of, like, all the website is stunning. We're an actual nonprofit, so there's a lot of fun things that we'll be doing that is open to the public. Like this tool that I showed you is going to be available to everybody. We build veilbreak.ai. I think I mentioned this last time, which is, basically a repository of all the laser experiments that anybody can use. Yeah, so stay tuned for these things. Oh, one thing I will mention is, if you want to stay updated with everything we do, I will actually, don't recall the exact thing, but you can just put it probably in the links. Go sign up for our newsletter, because we're updating about our events. We're doing incredible retreats now, which I'm actually very proud of, because we've had a few iterations now and people are just blown out of the water. So I'm so happy to share that with people. And we'll be doing more of those also, like in Colorado and things like this. So if you want to stay connected to that retreat itself, you can find in Core Retreat. So just COR retreat.com. But all of that information will always be shared with you if you sign up for our newsletter. So those are my promotional links